Hello, and welcome to the Sunshine State of Florida, any other day but today. My name is Daniel. My colleagues and I have all lived here for 2+ years, so we are well aware of Florida's flora and fauna. Today, we will be informing you about a common sea crustacean called the spiny lobster. You will learn how to identify the spiny lobster, their behaviors, their habitat, as well as how to fish for these massive lobsters. I will begin with how to identify spiny lobster. So why are they called a spiny lobster? So these lobsters have spines all over their head and back to protect from predators. And their color ranges from orange to brown with a blue tint in their legs and head. In the Caribbean Spiny Lobster Details page by the Dutch Caribbean Nature Alliance, who monitors the environment in the Caribbean, they state the spiny lobster can weigh up to 10 pounds and have an average length of 8 inches. Unlike pure cold water lobsters up north, these lobsters are without claws and pincers. According to the Spiny Lobster General Facts by the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, who regulates Florida's fish and game, the headed lobster contains 2 sets of antennae. The first larger set is used for fighting and defense, as the smaller set are little sensory organs that can detect changes in the lobster's environment. The lobster's mouth contains these tiny, thick, crushing teeth. The next segment is called the thorax, which is the central component of the lobster that is protected by a hard exoskeleton called the carcass. These lobsters go through a molting process where their carcass is lost and regrown as it matures. The last segment is called the abdomen, which is mostly the tail muscle of the lobster. Under the tail, there are pleopods that are used for mobility in the water. The tip of the tail is called the tail fin, which is made of triangular shells called uropods, and one rectangular shell called the tail fin. You have just learned how to spot spiny lobsters in the ocean, but now Cameron will teach you what these crustaceans eat.
Thanks, Daniel. Like you said, I'm Cameron Martinez, and I'm going to talk to you guys today about the lobster's diet, as well as their predators and their self-defense. So now, according to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA for short, the Caribbean spiny lobsters are foragers, meaning they search large areas for their food. They're also omnivores when young, but develop into carnivores as adults. Now, the young spiny lobsters, in their larval stages, will actually prey off microscopic plankton until they are developed enough to consume larger organisms. The adult lobsters will feed on snails, clams, crabs, and even sea urchins. Now I'm going to talk about their predators as well as their self-defense. They are also prey to many larger organisms, like most animals are. This includes species of sharks, turtles, octopi, grouper, snapper, rays, and more. They're also heavily fished by humans, but that's going to be touched on a little later in the presentation. Now, according to the University of Michigan's Museum of Zoology, they have 2 main methods of self-defense: the stick and slip mechanism, as well as the tail flip. Now, the first one, the stick and slip mechanism, is a phenomenon that's actually caused by the rubbing of their antennae against plates found underneath their eyes. Now, this generates a large screeching noise that can help to deter or scare off predators. Next, the second method, the tail flip, is caused when the lobster flips their tail, rapidly propelling them into a different direction, which helps them escape from possible predators. Now, pictured is a graphic from the University of Washington that shows exactly how the lobsters use the part of their antennae to scrape on those bumpy plates found underneath their eyes, creating friction, which causes that loud screech that I talked about earlier to deter predators. And now Ryan's going to give some information on location, habitat, as well as the lobster's role in the ecosystem.
That sure is right, Cameron. So let's go ahead and start things off with talking about where they're found. According to the Marine Bioconservation Society, the spiny lobster can be found in tropical or subtropical waters. And you'll be moving to New Smyrna Beach, which, as you can see in the diagram on the right, is prime lobster territory. According to the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, these little guys like to spawn anywhere from March all the way into early fall, somewhere around August. So if you find yourself out on the waters during those times, you're sure to have a fun time. And typically, you'll find the lobsters near shore when they're younger, and then as they get older, they'll migrate out to the deeper waters. So you're on the water and you're looking for these lobster. You dive down a few times and you're having trouble finding them. So where do you look exactly? And the answer is really anywhere with protection. The lobsters need protection from the predators. So coral reefs, rock shelves, or even any type of crevice really will offer that lobster the safety that it needs, and that's where you're most likely to find them. They're mostly nocturnal creatures, so they'll come out at night and occasionally do what they need to during the day, but during the day usually they're staying hidden away from those predators. And this comes especially important when females are pregnant and they have their eggs. And so basically the spawning is going to drive those females out to the deeper water where the hard bottom surfaces are located, and it's going to give them that protection again from those predators. Then the females will lay their eggs, and the eggs will hatch into little larvae, and the current from the oceans will bring the larvae all the way from the deep water where the rocky surfaces are into the shallower water where the sand and seagrass is. And that's going to provide a nice environment for those larvae to grow and develop in. So now that we talked about where they can be found in both a general consensus and where they are specifically in the water, what's their role? What do they do in the ecosystem? And according to Bruce Phillips' book, Lobsters as Part of Marine Ecosystems, they are mid-trophic consumers, mid-trophic level consumers, which basically means that they eat other things and other things eat them. So they're a good source of food for fish and sharks, as Cameron had mentioned earlier, but they also like to clean the bottom and feed on things like little crustaceans or worms or something like that. And so they provide a good food source for everyone. Additionally, they're able to access food that predators are not able to access. So they balance the ecosystem that way as well. And finally, we talked a little bit about how they benefit their own ecosystem, but how do they benefit the human ecosystem? And the answer is whenever those larvae hatches occur, the fishermen go crazy for the lobsters, and everyone goes out during the seasons and just absolutely just has a blast catching them. And you'll experience that too once you join down here in New Smyrna. But essentially these lobster are a large part of our economy down here, and they help stimulate our ecosystem. So now we're going to go ahead and move on to Corey, who's going to give you a little bit more information about what it's going to be like being down here. Hope to see you soon.
As new residents of New Smyrna Beach, you will be interested to learn that the spiny lobster is a favorite local food for much of the east coast of Florida, from Jacksonville down to Key West. Fresh spiny lobster tails can be found in restaurants, supermarkets, and seafood markets all over the state. According to research provided by Fisheries Journal, the commercial harvesting of spiny lobster in Florida began in the early 1800s and is currently responsible for almost 100% of these lobsters caught for profit in the United States. In fact, the humble spiny lobster holds second place only to shrimp as Florida's top fishing industry. These days, almost all commercial fishing of lobsters is done via baited traps that sit on the ocean floor until retrieved by boat. This practice is non-invasive and helps the Florida spiny lobster retain its healthy and sustainable population. After an in-depth study, the esteemed Monterey Bay Aquarium Seafood Watch program classified them as a good alternative food, meaning that the ecological impacts and ethics involved in the commercial spiny lobster fishing industry are right where they should be. For any of you that are interested in getting your feet wet, the sport harvesting of spiny lobsters is a very popular activity in the warm waters of Florida. Every August cues the start of the open season as local residents and tourists alike take to their water with their snorkels, scuba tanks, and nets with the hope of bringing home lobster for dinner. To protect the population, Florida Fish and Wildlife has strict harvesting regulations and seasons in place. From August to April, feel free to catch 6 lobsters per person. However, during the 3-day mini season in July, you can collect up to 12 per person outside of the Florida Keys. Anyone interested in joining the so-called Bug Bonanza will need to acquire a saltwater fishing license, a lobster permit, and a measuring device to ensure their lobsters meet the minimum 3-inch body size, and also a way to get down to the crevices where they like to hide. Make sure nobody collects any pregnant females, as you could face a stiff penalty and harm the sustainability of the species. Now that you have been appropriately introduced to the Florida spiny lobster, it is our hope that you have learned how these tropical crustaceans live and how they fit into our local environment. You will most certainly remember that they are quite aptly named due to their many spines, as well as the fact that they do not have claws like their cold water relatives. You have learned that despite their loud defenses, the spiny lobster is quite a popular food source for many of the creatures in Florida, from groupers and sharks to people like you and me. Make it a point as you are settling into your new environment to find out how you and your family can take advantage of living near such an interesting and delicious member of our local waters. We all thank you for listening and wish you the best as you become more acquainted with Florida's flora and fauna.